You're watching Let's Chat.
I'm here today with my friend Iggy of Iggy's Loudmouth podcast to tell us all about why we should tune into his podcast and all the cool things we can learn, especially this mental health day you're rolling out.
Yeah.
Let's start from the beginning. Tell me about Iggy's Loudmouth podcast.
All right, so Iggy's Loudmouth podcast is a podcast primarily focused on Chattanooga. So I'm from Chattanooga. So I realized there was an avenue needed for some discussion, a conversation within our community. So I started a podcast based around that, and then started getting into music, art, culture with it. And yeah, so that's where the premise of it started.
I love the name, and I know the importance of a good name for branding.
Yes.
I really like when I was reading the rundown today of who I was in. I was excited. Oh, Iggy's Loudmouth.
Yeah, the Loudmouth stands out.
Yeah.
So Loudmouth is the premise of a Loudmouth is to make sure people understand, like, it's important to speak your mind. It's important to stand on what you believe. It's important to have intimate conversations. All that's wrapped up into Loudmouth. When you think of Loudmouth, it's a strong word.
Right.
So when you come on a podcast, you're going to hear stronger topics. You're going to hear stronger conversations, maybe deeper things that you normally don't hear. And also fun things. I'm also a fun guy. I mean, I don't always want it to be deep, but even in the fun aspect, it's loud, it's fun, it's laughter, it's all of that. So all that encompasses into Loudmouth.
Now you interview people like I do.
I do, yeah.
So you have to know the questions to ask to get, like you said, those vulnerable sound bites and get them to really share.
Absolutely.
If people have a choice of podcasts to listen to, kind of like a choice of shows to watch, why should they tune into yours?
I believe people should tune into mine because I bring a different conversation. I love watching interviews. I came up watching interviews. I watch late night television interviews. And so I take pride in making sure a listener or a viewer, in fact, will get to know a person off that interview, maybe that they didn't know, or maybe that they didn't expect, even if it's 5 minutes or 30 minutes, I try to get a conversation going so where after they're like, I really learned something, or I really learned something about you. So,
right.
Yeah.
So do you touch upon controversial topics?
I can. I have lately died down about that a little bit, but I have before, and I don't shy away from that, but I also want to I'm about community building.
Right.
So if it is controversial, it's in that way. It's an honest way. It's in hopes to connect and unify rather than divide.
I love that. Yeah. That's important. So what are some of the topics who are some of the people you've had on and topics you discuss?
So I've had on musicians, like, I don't know if you guys know any local artists, but YG Tut. I've also done things with Chattanooga Hip Hop Summit. So recently they've had some bigger guests come in. DJ Chuck T's from North Carolina. He's working with the Charlotte Hornets right now as far as DJing there for the team. So I've interviewed him and just bigger events and smaller things. I've done intimate conversations at the wood shop where I bring in a poet or a artist and they show off their art. So I've had that as well. So
do you ever discuss Riverbend and the lineups there and the controversy?
I can. I stayed away from Riverbend this year.
Right.
But I have before. I've talked about my thoughts on what we should do with Riverbend. I also talked about maybe Riverbend investing into more local things. I see the Chattanooga Hip Hop Summit picture right there. So more local things as far as like local artists, maybe investing back into that. So I've done those conversations and I'm definitely open to that for sure.
I love that. I think it's interesting.
Yeah, I do. I believe in Chattanooga. I think especially in that scene, music, art, culture. I believe there's a lot to offer there in the city. So
and finding a way to include everyone.
Include everyone.
Is important.
Absolutely.
So Mental Health Monday, you were telling me briefly about this out there. Mental health is, always is being discussed.
Yes.
What does this podcast feature?
So Mental Health Monday is a new element to the podcast I started this year. Last year, really coming out of COVID, it kind of started.
Right.
A lot of people had time to sit with themselves in quarantine, maybe sit with other people they haven't sat with in a long time in quarantine. A lot of people dealt with some losses, some gains in COVID. So there was a lot of mental health aspects during that time. So, and then also personally, my personal life changed a lot in the past year and a half. So this year I started, I noticed there was a gap in discussion of mental health with men. I don't know if you guys know this, but it's Men's Health Month. So it's very important
It
to
is.
me.
I did know that.
But also specifically black men. I think our mental health is something I'm kind of passionate about at this point. I think, and so I started at this year to do every Monday, start out the week. You know, the first day of the week for most people is Monday.
Right.
And start out the week talking about topics, talking about maybe personal things going on that I can reflect back that maybe somebody else can pick up on, or, you know, discussion pieces. I've had, want to have more therapists on to talk about maybe some keys, because I'm not necessarily professional.
Right.
I just go off of some of the self-care things I've done.
You don't need to be professional. You're sharing the community experience.
But even professional, you know, it helps to have some professional aspect. But I do think, yes, I agree. I don't necessarily have to be a professional to share those things, and I won't. I'm very big on self-care and having those discussions as far as our community. So.
And men's mental health, it needs to be discussed more and shared more, if you ask me.
Absolutely.
Because, you know, men are sometimes known to be afraid to ask for directions or afraid to ask for help.
Ask for directions.
To know you're not, sorry, but to know that you're not alone, and it's okay to say, hey, I'm struggling with something.
Help. Absolutely.
Especially start the week off on that note.
Yes.
You know, I really love that.
Yeah.
So where do you see the future of this podcast going, and how can we find you?
Yeah, so I see the future of the podcast continuing to grow. I want to have all those elements that I talked about as far as culture, music, sports, arts, mental health into pieces, and hopefully develop into a YouTube channel where you can, if you want to see Iggy's Loudmouth podcast, mental health, there's a channel for you. There's a sports channel, all of that. So that's the goal. Ultimately,
what if someone feels like they might have an interesting idea or might want to talk to you?
Feel free, hit me up. So my contact is I'm on Instagram, Iggy's Loudmouth Podcast, IGGYS Loudmouth, LOUDMOUTH Podcast, all together. And then, yeah, if you go onto the channel, any podcast channel on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts,
awesome.
You can find me, Iggy's Loudmouth Podcast. Just type it in. I'll pull right up.
Is there a video to go? Like, I guess you're recording it.
So there's some YouTube. I have some YouTube as well, Iggy's Loudmouth Podcast. But those are a little older. I'm revamping the YouTube up a little bit and kind of update it. But all of my episodes are on Apple and Google. And so if you'd like to listen to podcasts, they're available for you.
Well, I loved having you on today, Iggy, and getting to know the good work you're doing. It's entertaining, but it also sounds informative and a really important work.
I hope to continue to have that feeling.
Yeah, great. Well, it definitely came across.
Thank you.
So thanks for coming on the show. Go check out Iggy's Loudmouth Podcast. He can be found Facebook, Instagram. Looks like they even have a merchandise store.
I do, yes. I have merch. I have my shirt on.
Love it. Love on brand. Yes. Thanks so much for coming on the show, Iggy. Iggy's Loudmouth Podcast right here in Chattanooga. Love it. It's fun. Fun interview.